Hey, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. My name is Vanessa Rufus. I'll be your host for the next couple of hours. We have a whole lot to get to, including some top stories that we've been following throughout the day here on Live Impact News and on WCNC Plus. So if you were just watching in our 6 o'clock hour where we had some breaking news for you, we wanted to make sure that you did not miss this, the update here on this explosion that we've been following out of Lenoir. So once again here, this is some viewer footage that we received of the aftermath. You can see that massive fireball. That is a situation that we're hearing stemmed from exploding propane tanks. And so this was dispatched, we're told around 3 o'clock this afternoon. Lenoir Fire responded to this. This was reported as a structure fire on Norwood Street Southwest, but we can tell you not only is a structure impacted, a building, essentially the exterior and interior damage, but there was also a food truck in the area. We're told that this was a restaurant called Taqueria El Tío Rico, and this is something where we've not heard this officially from the officials, but our Jessie Pierre went to the scene, and she says she spoke with the family that owns this restaurant, and they told her that nobody was injured, thankfully, but clearly a devastating situation. They've apparently owned this restaurant for several years at this point. And like we said, a lot of damage is reported. So we wanted to also give a shout out here to Misha Burgess, who is the viewer here who shared this image with us. She shared this explosion at the time, telling us she believed a food truck had caught fire. And as we just mentioned, we're able to confirm that not only was a food truck impacted, but the restaurant itself. We'll keep you updated as we get more information on this. Meantime, we also wanted to keep you abreast of the very latest with that mass shooting in Catawba County. So this was confirmed to us to be a house party where lots of folks were, and this was an overnight shooting. So just after midnight, essentially early Sunday morning. Unfortunately, one person died, and we know that 11 people were injured. At last check this evening, we know that of all the folks that had to go to the hospital, one remains getting care. It sounds like everyone else has been discharged at this point. Also new this evening, officials are expanding their request for camera footage. So we shared with you before, they are trying to get more witnesses to speak up and also get any sort of video from that evening, whether it was before, during, or after the shooting, during the party, whatnot. And they had a radius that they were looking at. That radius is expanded. So now they are looking for folks who might have camera footage on the following roads near Walnut Acres Drive. So it's Highway 127, Huffman Farm Road, Pittstown Road, and now the radius includes Bethel Church Road. So once again, Walnut Acres Drive near Highway 127, Huffman Farm Road, Pittstown Road, and Bethel Church Road. And don't forget, there is a $15,000 reward for anyone who can help with arrests or prosecutions in this case. We have heard from authorities that they thought there might be around 80 rounds that were fired at this house party. They believe that there might be multiple people involved, and they have a website where you can submit any sort of witness video. That website is fbi.gov/Catawba County shooting. fbi.gov/Catawba County shooting. And we will continue to follow the very latest for you in this case. Now, we know as well, over the weekend, there was another big incident, and we're learning more and more about this situation, not only from authorities, but also people who are being personally impacted. We're talking about what's now being characterized by authorities as a crime spree in Union County. And we know that this crime spree, according to authorities, ended with the suspect in a shootout with police, the suspect dead, and a Monroe police officer injured. Well, today our Miles Harris spoke with the mother of a 23-year-old who was killed in what was believed to be part of this crime spree. So this 23-year-old's death was believed to be the very first crime in this string of other crimes that authorities say that they're tracking. And she said that this person, obviously a very special one, not only to her, but also to other people in their family, because this man was a father to 3 young children, and his loss is something that they're still trying to grapple with. So let's listen now to Miles's reporting on the very latest with this case.
Well, the investigation continues into those tragic series of events that hit parts of Union County over the weekend and took the life of a 23-year-old named Alvin Parson. Well, tonight we sat down with that victim's mother to learn more about who Alvin was to his family, but also this community.
Fun-loving person, love family, will definitely love his children with all his heart.
Teresa McNeil and her family is left grieving the loss of a young man, Alvin Parson Jr., a family man and father to 3 children who had his whole life ahead of him.
I saw yellow tape, police cars, and I knew something wasn't right. And I mean, my heart just dropped.
Deputies share that Teresa's son Alvin's body was found Saturday morning inside an Indian Trail home along Astoria Drive. Investigators believe that this homicide is connected to a Monroe police chase that ended in the death of the suspected gunman, Joshua Sykes. Union County Sheriff's Office shared with WCNC Charlotte Tuesday Parson had been dating Sykes' sister. She is also the mother of Parsons' daughter, and Parsons' mother said that she spoke with Alvin just hours before the shooting.
It was actually Friday night when I last spoke to him. He asked me to pray for him and his friends. And because we usually pray every night.
A motive has not been released in this case, and for Teresa and her family, they're hoping to heal as they try to navigate through this challenging time.
Trying to get information on where to start, what to do, just trying to hold it together, for his children, and it's hard for his sister, his brother.
The family has set up a GoFundMe account to help with funeral costs and support for Alvin's kids. We posted that link in this story on our WCNC Charlotte mobile app. In Union County, I'm Miles Harris, WCNC Charlotte.
Folks, we'll keep you updated with that. We've got to get to some breaking news. So we were just talking about this Hickory mass shooting, the Catawba County incident that we continue to follow up on. We just got some breaking new details into our Live Impact news stream just a few moments ago. So we received confirmation from the FBI Charlotte Division that they executed multiple search warrants related to this incident today. FBI not sharing any more information on that, but our crews have been able to confirm that there has been an arrest made. So we're reading this all together. We're going to learn about this together. Our crews are telling us the arrest here is a 20-year-old person from Lenoir who has been taken into custody related to this mass shooting. The name is Garen Nathaniel Killian. Killian has been charged with 1 count of attempted first-degree murder. Killian is being held with no bond in the Newton detention facility. There is a first appearance tomorrow. So essentially, after an arrest, we usually see that person face a judge. There would be the potential for bond to be discussed at that point. They're read their charges, etc. So there will be a court appearance tomorrow. And we're also hearing from law enforcement, as we kind of alluded to with the FBI statement we received just a little bit ago. Law enforcement is confirming that they've executed multiple search warrants regarding this investigation. They do anticipate, they say here, additional suspects being arrested. But they say potentially not going to get any more information on that tonight. Sounds like the wheels are turning, though, in the situation. So to recap here, the very latest here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus, we've got breaking news on that Hickory mass shooting from over the weekend. This was the situation where we saw early Sunday morning, there was a party, shots fired. Authorities say they thought maybe around 80 shots fired, 1 person killed, 11 people injured, many had to go to the hospital. And now we have an arrest in this case and search warrants that have been executed in multiple places, according to both FBI and Catawba County Sheriff's Office. We've got another. Okay, we're getting a little bit more information here. So one of our executive producers has been able to track down a bit more on the person who was arrested, and it sounds like they have been arrested before, actually back in April, for a shooting. So 20-year-old Garen Nathaniel Killian of Lenoir I'm going to go through here our prior reporting. By the way, you can find this on our website, WCNC.com, if you want to go to this backstory. But apparently this person has been arrested before for reportedly opening fire into a crowd. And I actually remember us covering this. This was April 8th of this year. He was one of two arrested after Hickory police say they opened fire into a crowd. Officers that day responded to a parking lot near a Chuck E. Cheese. They say that someone fired shots into a crowd after there was a fight. Nobody hurt, thankfully, but they had a suspect description of a vehicle. Police say they were able to find the people within minutes. One of the people, they say, was 20-year-old Garen Nathaniel Killian, as we mentioned, of Lenore. There was also an 18-year-old from Hickory who were charged, both charged with 7 counts of attempted first-degree murder, 7 counts of assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill, going armed to the terror of the public, and discharging a firearm in city limits. They were granted a $100,000 bond the next day. Looks like they were in jail for some time, and that's the very latest that we have with that situation. So, lots of threads to pull on here on Live Impact News. We're going to keep a close eye on this situation because it's developing really quickly here. We don't know when else we're going to get an update. It could be in just a few minutes like you saw here. But be sure that we'll make sure that you are abreast of everything that is going on here. I know that this has certainly put the community on edge. We had crews out there again today speaking with business owners, folks who live around there, saying that this was really a concern. This was something that scared them. The fact that there is still, at that time, there were still no arrests. That's changing now. And we'll just remind you that authorities are telling us they believe more people will be arrested, and they will keep us updated on that. Okay, folks. With that said, we're going to turn now to a live feed that's just now coming in here to Live Impact News. We've got a discussion that's underway, and so we know that discussions about ICE detainments are getting a lot of publicity. You see them a lot in the headlines. We've certainly talked about impacts and some concerns from folks. We hear, on the other side, folks who are cheering some of these detainments. So, I mean, it's definitely a complicated issue and very polarizing. But there's someone who is having a discussion following their detainment earlier this year. So Badar Kansuri, who's a postdoctoral fellow at Georgetown University, was detained by ICE earlier this year. There's kind of a discussion, a Q&A that's happening right now, talking about the state of civil liberties right now, immigration and what they're characterizing academic freedom in the U.S. So we've been hearing from him throughout the evening. Sounds like there have been some other speakers as well, but we want to listen in live for just a bit here on Live Impact News.
So the thing is that civil society is extremely important. And courts also look at the society, what society demands. And if civil society really knows what's happening, people know what's happening, and they know the due process, they know their freedom of speech, and those things are targeted. And it is for their own thing that they want to keep a constitutional democracy or they want to let it sink towards autocracy. It's on people to decide. People like me will do all my bit, will say whatever happened to me, will always stand with the marginalized, and if it helps American society, I'm extremely proud of that.
Okay, good. You ever, right here.
I mean, I would say something here that, see, I come from land of Mahatma Gandhi, and Mahatma Gandhi belongs to everyone. He was preaching only love and forgiveness to people. He was shot dead. Your own Martin Luther King was preaching civil liberties and everything, and he was shot dead. Ultimately, if even they will kill me, I'm ready for doing that as well. But I'll be on this good track. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I had a question for the lawyer. So you had mentioned you've seen for 20 years people going through these prison systems. So I'm curious to know how different or unprecedented is the situation we're seeing now? Have we seen in the previous Trump administration or any other administration, any sort of similar cases to this? We're just sort of randomly snatching off people for their perceived threat to foreign policy or whatever.
So this foreign policy ground, this section 237A4C, and this en masse use of it is new. And in the past, part of the difficulty that we have as lawyers even to deal with this issue is that there's no precedent. There's one case from the Board of Immigration Appeals from 1999 that we can rely on, and that's what I was telling you, where the state of the law is as bad as it is. That's the case that actually comes from, which itself grew out of a case that was decided by none other than Marianne Trump, President Trump's sister, in 1996, out of the Third Circuit decision. There are a lot of buttons to press and a lot of levers to pull in order to transform our immigration machine into our immigration law into a deportation machine. And what I've noticed this time is, whereas before it was sort of like just bringing a sledgehammer and just, breaking down everything in Trump 1.0, this time they brought a scalpel. They knew exactly where to push. They knew exactly where to pull. And it feels a lot more surgical this time. And as a due process enthusiast, it scares me and concerns me a great deal what we're seeing this time around.
Okay, we have a question back here.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Behind you.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you.
Sanjeev.
Thanks, Nader. For Mr. Suri and the attorney, thank you both so much for sharing your wisdom. My question is, what would you like to see all of us doing right now? The people in this room, the networks we're a part of, both with regards to your case, other people facing the same situation, and then more broadly, what do you want us to be doing?
Hassan, you want to take that first, and then we'll get Butter to weigh in?
Be loud, in a word. I think our elected officials need to understand that there's a cost to supporting or even remaining silent in the face of these policies. This administration has been pushing the envelope to try to see what they can get away with. And the more silent you are, the more they're going to take. I've spent 20 years, much of my practice is in removal defense and filing asylum cases, well documented, how people have to run from tyranny, how people have to run from authoritarianism. And there's one thing you realize, whether you're talking about Bukele in El Salvador, or you were talking about Bashar al-Assad in Syria, or you're even talking about Narendra Modi in Egypt, in India, they all have the same playbook. And tyranny looks the same everywhere. And when I start to see things here that remind me of things I had to document from cases from my asylum-seeking clients, that's something that we need to make sure doesn't happen. And it happens quicker than you would think. And that makes it a collective obligation on those of us. Dr. Suri is still here on a visa. He's in deportation proceedings, but yet he speaks. What excuse do you and I have?
Thank you.
I would say a small thing, that anarchy is what states make out of it. Similarly, societies are what people make out of it. So build your society.
Let's take two more questions, and then we'll start to wrap it up. Oh, yeah, sorry, there's a question right here. Go ahead. Yeah.
You mentioned a guard punched you on your knee. Did they regularly get physical with people?
I don't know. This happened once to me. So I don't know. Didn't do it regularly. Normally they come with pepper spray. They normally pepper spray people because there was a solitary confinement pod in front of our pod. So regularly they will all run and bring someone with pepper spray on them.
Last question. Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Dr. Suri. You've spoken about a lot of dark experiences that you had in detention. So I wonder if you could speak about any positive, not positive, but any hopeful experiences or interactions that you had in detention? Thank you.
So kind of I live a dialectical life all the time. If there is a suffering, I always see something happiness. This is how we have to live. And there also, I was doing everything. If there was someone who was there was this guy, Adam, he used to build houses. So when he will make his map, I will make my map, that this is like Indian style of apartment, you can do it. There was this guy called John, he said that he was 500 pound when he was like raising voice and his wife, and he was fighting, and suddenly his daughter called police, and then his daughter said, hey, Baba, run away. I called police and they will come and take you. So they took him and he lost 300 pounds, he said, in 1 month in county jail. But I still said that don't eat sugar, try to control your weight. And once I saw him, he just had a bite of this sugar-rich cake and he threw it. I said, what are you doing? I said, you told me that not to eat sugar. So I will tell people to have better. So what I would also do, that mostly people were not English speakers. And although, and some of them didn't know their rights. So there was some kind of a small clinic there. In that we can request certain medicines. So I would teach them that, say that I have pain here, do this blood test of mine, I need vitamin D test, I need this multivitamins, because they were shocked to see that how I was able to get it. So I would regularly write for them that I have this myopia, this and that. I was even literally for at least 3-4 people, I was writing their letter to their judges about their cases, because they were not having any attorney. So I was writing letters for them. I was living my life there, not living, but I was doing whatever I can do. And I was able to help everyone there by every means possible. Yeah.
Okay. So please give it up for Badr Khan Suri. Go ahead. So let me thank everyone for coming. Let me thank especially, of course, Badr Khan for coming under this very difficult time for you and your family, given that you're still facing deportation hearings. Your courage is inspiring to all of us. So thank you for being here and for answering these questions. I want to thank also the great people at Busboys and Poets, especially the great Andy Shalal, who wants to say some final words.
Thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Dr. Suri. Thank you, Hassan. Thank you, Nada. I wanted to ask just 2 simple questions really quick, and I don't know if they've been answered already, but all of these are individual cases. They're very similar, right? You have Mahmoud Khalil, you have Ramiza Öztürk, you have Dr. Suri, of course. Are you guys combining efforts together to try to create some kind of class action thing going on?
Well, I wouldn't call it a class action, but we are absolutely all in touch with each other. We're all sharing resources. We're all sharing research and doing what we can to save our resources, save our bandwidth, so that we can put our minds where it's best used. So yes, we are definitely sharing.
Is it the same legal arguments in all of them?
Similar.
Very similar.
Similar, yeah. There are certain differences because of location. So Mahmoud Khalil, for example, is in his case is in Louisiana, which is located in the Fifth Circuit, and we're trying different things. So we're trying different things, and each decision that comes out, and so far they've all been mostly positive, gives us a little bit more momentum. But like I said, the state of the law is so bad on this issue of, and the burden of proof for the government is, well, there is no burden of proof for the government, really. That's really what it comes down to. So we have a long way to go. What has to change is the law itself, and that's why we need everyone to make as much noise as possible.
And the other part I wanted to ask you is about, and maybe this is for you, Nader, is the weaponization of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism has become a dog whistle for white supremacy. And oftentimes, like for instance, the attack that happened in Boulder, Colorado, with the Molotov cocktails, the president, he never mentioned the word Jewish.
So he only said this is an anti-Semitic thing. And of course, a lot of his people really don't like Jews. I mean, let's be real. They're truly anti-Semitic. But anti-Semitic is being used as a weapon to say this is to promote anti-supremacy, and so using that kind of threshold to be able to do that. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with the idea of, sort of getting beyond that?
Well, I mean, the first thing you have to do is you have to forcefully state that all of us condemn all forms of bigotry and racism, including anti-Semitism. Point number one.
But I think if you say anti-Semitism, you're saying anti-white supremacy.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to be careful than to say I condemn anti-Semitism. You say I condemn hatred against Jewish people.
Right.
It's not always anti-Semitism,
Right.
you know?
Generally, anti-Semitism is considered to be anti-Jewish bigotry. Most people understand that. But if they don't, they should.
His people don't.
His people don't. Well, the irony of the Trump administration and Trump himself claiming he's arresting people like Badr Khan and Mahmoud Khalil and clamping down on universities in the name of anti-Semitism is that Trump himself is one of the biggest anti-Semites in the country.
Absolutely.
So if you don't like a behavior and you want to stop it, the first thing you should do is stop promoting it yourself. Right? That's
Well, you
point
have to
number one.
you have to redefine anti-Semitism and how they're using it, and use it as a weapon against them.
I agree.
Because that's really what needs to happen.
No, I totally agree. And of course, then we have the whole question of how Israel and Netanyahu are deliberately using anti-Semitism to justify this genocide.
Absolutely.
Completely distorting sort of what's going on here and using it as a shield to justify this, grotesque moral obscenity that's ongoing in Gaza, as everyone knows, and is getting worse. So, I think one has to be morally consistent here. One has to point out the hypocrisy and the cynical manipulation of these claims that are being used to justify these authoritarian policies. And I want to thank you, Andy, once again for giving us an opportunity at this bookstore for having these types of discussions and debates. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
So you can see that conversation now wrapping up. As we mentioned, this was a discussion from someone who was detained by ICE earlier this year. He talked about his experience with that. And this was supposed to be an overall discussion of the state of civil liberties, immigration, and how they put it in billing this event, academic freedom in the United States. As we talked about, this is a really polarizing issue, and you hear folks on both sides, multiple sides, either, you see them denouncing some of these operations. You hear people who are cheering them as well. And we know that the White House is defending the new ICE operations, the ramped up ICE operations that we're seeing. Some of that are addressed today with the White House press secretary briefing. Of course, other topics top of mind as well discussed today. So we want to take you to that earlier briefing today. And we did want to mention for you here on Live Impact News, as we move to multi-boxes, you might start to see weather popping up. We just wanted to give you a heads up that we are watching some severe weather out in the Midwest. So we might be talking about that in just a bit as well. But for now, the White House press secretary.
How are you? Good. It's good to see all of you. I want to start by addressing the horrific act of violence that took place on Sunday in Boulder, Colorado. President Trump and the entire administration's hearts go out to the victims, and they are in our prayers during this unimaginable time. According to reporting from Fox News, the alleged attacker admitted in an interview that he wanted to kill all Zionist people and had been planning the attack for over a year and would do it again if he could. This monster used a makeshift flamethrower and Molotov cocktails to light Jewish Americans on fire in an attempt to burn them alive. The victims at the incident location in Boulder were there to rally in support of Israeli hostages who remain in Hamas captivity. 12 were injured, including a Holocaust survivor. This is pure evil. The Department of Justice has already filed federal hate crime charges against the alleged perpetrator, and he will be held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. This tragedy is a sobering reminder of the consequences of the Biden administration's failed policies. According to the Department of Homeland Security, the Boulder suspect is an Egyptian national who was in the United States illegally. He entered the U.S. during the Biden administration in August 2022 on a B-2 visa until it expired. Upon the visa expiration, he overstayed, filed an asylum claim, and was given a work authorization by the Biden administration. Instead of deporting this heinous individual, Joe Biden's administration allowed him to stay in our country and to work. President Trump sounded the alarm over these reckless Biden policies for years because this is the predictable result of letting anti-American radicals and illegal immigrants pour into our country. Immigration security is national security. And that's why the Trump administration, at the direction of our great president, has secured our border, strengthened our immigration system, and has taken immediate steps to protect the United States from foreign terrorists and other public safety threats. President Trump acted swiftly upon taking office to reform our visa issuance process to ensure that dangerous aliens who are intent on harming Americans or our national security interests are no longer admitted into our country. Under the Trump administration, aliens will only be admitted into the United States through the legal process and only if they do not bear hostile attitudes towards our citizens, our culture, our government, our institutions, or most importantly, our founding principles. Under President Trump, the United States has zero tolerance for foreign visitors who support terrorism. Violators of U.S. law, including international students, will continue to face visa denial or revocation and deportation. And illegal alien criminals will continue to be arrested and deported from our country. On that note, ICE and federal law enforcement partners just wrapped up a month-long surge operation arresting nearly 1,500 illegal aliens in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. During the enhanced operation, dubbed Operation Patriot, ICE Boston and other federal law enforcement personnel focused on transnational organized crime, gangs, and dangerous illegal alien offenders throughout Mass. More than half of the nearly 1,500 illegals arrested had significant criminal convictions or charges pending against them. Here are just some of the violent illegal aliens who were removed from communities in Massachusetts during Operation Patriot. A Salvadorian national with active Interpol red notice for aggravated homicide. A Guatemalan national and registered sex offender who had pending criminal charges in Boston for 5 counts of indecent assault and battery on a person 14 or over. A Honduran national who was last arrested for rape, indecent assault, and battery of a person 14 or over. A Colombian national charged with kidnapping, aggravated rape, and indecent assault and battery on a person 14 or over. And a Guatemalan national who was convicted of murder in Boston. Also, a Brazilian national who was charged with aggravated rape of a child by force and possession of child pornography. Again, these are people who are living in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And lastly, a Salvadorian national whose criminal history includes charges of aggravated rape of a child by force. I don't think anybody in this room wants these types of heinous criminals in your communities. And it's thanks to this administration that they are being removed from our country. When Democrat-run jurisdictions released violent illegal alien criminals back into communities after making arrests instead of turning them over to federal immigration enforcement like they should, those Democrats are putting law-abiding Americans at risk. And these insane policies force law enforcement officials to make much more difficult arrests that put their lives, our law enforcement lives, in jeopardy. President Trump is incredibly grateful for our heroic officers on the front lines getting these violent illegal alien invaders out of our communities. Law and order is back in America under President Trump. And on that same note, there are new crime statistics that show crime is plummeting. In fact, Politico summed it up like this. Murder rates are tumbling across the U.S. in 2025. Homicide stats are down at least 20% over last year, and we could be on course for the lowest number on record. With President Trump in charge, the days of criminals being put over victims are over. On the topic of immigration, the Washington Post just ran one of the most ridiculous headlines ever, even by their standards. And on my very first briefing, several months ago, I said I would hold anyone accountable in this room. The Washington Post actually had this headline, "The Mysterious Drop in Fentanyl Seizures on the U.S.-Mexico Border." How is this mysterious? There is no mystery about why there is a decrease in fentanyl coming into the United States. This administration's strong border policies are the reason there has been a decrease in fentanyl trafficking. His strengthened relationship with Mexican President Sheinbaum and all of the measures he has been taking to deter illegal human and drug trafficking at our United States southern border is the reason for plummeting fentanyl seizures at the U.S. border. There is nothing mysterious about that, and we'd like to see the Washington Post update their headline accordingly. This is clearly trying to intentionally manipulate the minds of the Americans And I think the American people understand why there's been a fentanyl drop. And our office responded to this inquiry. We provided a whole host of the reasons that fentanyl seizures at the southern border have dropped, and the Washington Post refused to run them. And that's despicable. In other news, positive economic reports continue to flood in. Inflation dropped to 2.1% in April. Personal income increased 0.8% in April. So inflation is down and wages are up. That's almost triple the expectations and against the doubts of nearly everyone in this room. And we also saw the largest monthly decline in the trade deficit on record as a result of President Trump's very powerful tariffs. Lastly, the price of eggs has dropped more than 61% since President Trump took office in January. I remember my very first briefing, I was asked about the cost of eggs. The reporter tried to insinuate it was this administration's fault, even though he had only been here for a few days or weeks. It was a result of the previous administration's terrible policies, and in record time, this president has fixed that problem that he inherited from Joe Biden, and now egg prices have dropped 61% since this president took office. There's a lot of good news, and I'm sure you have a lot of questions, so let's get to them. We have just the news and our new media seat today. Amanda Head, thank you for being with us. Why don't you kick us off?
Sure, thank you so much. There is a disturbing trend of anti-Semitism turning into terrorism. Of course, the Boulder, Colorado instance that you just mentioned, the 2 Israeli embassy staffers who were murdered, Pennsylvania governor's mansion with the Jewish governor inside getting set on fire. Does the president consider this domestic terrorism? And as such, are there official alerts to law enforcement, BOLOs, task forces, things like that?
The president has made it very clear, as he said in his statement yesterday, that yes, these anti-Semitic acts of violence are do qualify as terrorism, and he does not want to see terrorism or violence of any form taking place in the United States of America. And as for specifically anti-Semitic terrorism and anti-Semitic acts of violence and those that are targeting Jewish Americans, this administration has done more to combat that violence than any administration in history. And one incident is one too many. And I think, frankly, that's something the previous administration was not willing to say. This president will stand up for Americans of all religions, of all faiths, of all creeds, and we will continue to look at policy measures and actions that we can take in addition to the actions that have already been taken to curb this anti-Semitic violence. And to Jewish Americans at home, across the country, this president has your back.
And then on another issue, back in February, Secretary Kennedy created a commission to re-examine the childhood vaccine schedule. But there are still states outstanding like California, Connecticut, Maine that are not allowing any religious exemptions for kids not only to go to school but to participate in sports and extracurricular activities. Would the president want to see religious exemptions allowed across all 50 states? And how do you enforce that, especially with states like California that are already defying the president on the men and women's sports issue?
Generally speaking, I know the president supports religious exemptions for families when it comes to vaccinations. As for the instances in those specific states, I'll have the administration and the White House look into it and see what executive action, if any, we can take on that front. Thank you. Kelly.
Good afternoon. We're now in hurricane season, and obviously there is great concern every year about the potential for that. Can you speak to how the president is planning to have the level of support, should it be needed, to be as it has been with a reduction in the workforce? And is he still comfortable with Administrator Richardson, who had talked, whether joking or not, about not being aware of a hurricane season for this country? What is the president's level of briefings on what may be required? If you could give us kind of an overall update on that.
Sure. Well, of course, we know that we are into hurricane season now, and I know FEMA is taking this seriously, contrary to some of the reporting we have seen based on jokes that were made and leaks from meetings. But Secretary Kristi Noem and the FEMA leadership are all over this. They are committed to ensuring that federal resources and tax dollars are there for Americans in need. And the president continues to review requests for emergency aid and carefully considering them. However, this president has made it clear we're not going to enable states to make bad decisions with federal tax dollars and then have the federal government later have to bail these states out. We want to see states be responsible with their tax dollars to do as much as they possibly possibly can, and then the president will deeply and thoughtfully consider any requests for federal aid that come to his desk. And I think some of the media reporting we've seen on this is frankly sloppy and irresponsible. There are serious people who are taking this issue seriously, starting with the president himself, who, as you know, on his first domestic trip back in office, visited both North Carolina and California, both of which were, of course, hit by natural disasters when he wasn't even president, but he took ownership of that and visited those places and those people immediately.
Is it
Brian?
about hurricane season appropriate, though, now that this is serious business, as you talked about?
It's serious business, Kelly, and I'm not going to engage in such fodder with a question like that. Brian?
Thank you, Caroline. Reuters was reporting that there is a letter that is meant to be sent to other countries, which would give these countries a deadline of Wednesday to produce their best offer on the trade matter. Why does the administration feel the need to send this letter? And I have one more follow-up on trade.
Sure. I can confirm the merits and the content of the letter. USTR sent this letter to all of our trading partners just to give them a friendly reminder that the deadline is coming up. And they are in talks. Ambassador Greer, Secretary Bessent, Secretary Lutnick are in talks with many of our key trading partners around the globe. As you know, Brian, I know the Wall Street Journal has covered this quite heavily. And they continue to be engaged in those discussions. And this letter was simply to remind these countries that the deadline is approaching and the president expects good deals, and we are on track for that, I will emphasize.
On the trade side, though, when the deal with the United Kingdom, there was this idea of a reprieve on the auto tariffs. Is the president looking to do another similar deal on the sector-by-sector reduction in tariffs, or is this more going to be deals related to the reciprocal tariffs that were announced months ago?
Well, as I've said previously from the podium, and the president has discussed as well, each country has unique advantages, unique challenges to it based on their markets and what they export to us and what we export to them. And so that's why the president smartly advised his trade team to engage in tailor-made deal-making. And we saw that with the United Kingdom, and we will.
All right, folks, live Impact News on WCNC Plus. We will check back in with this White House press secretary briefing and our 3-box in just a few moments. But we wanted to make sure that we were checking in here with the very latest on this breaking news we've been following for you tonight. An update on that mass shooting in Hickory from over the weekend. For folks who are just joining us here on the stream, we've gotten confirmation this evening, really just a few moments ago, that there has been an arrest made in this case. The person is a 20-year-old. According to the Catawba County Sheriff's Office. Garen Nathaniel Killian is his name. He's from Lenore, and we are told that he is taken into custody related to this mass shooting, which we shared before with you, killed 1 person and injured 11 others. So we're seeing with the charges here, Mr. Killian charged with 1 count of attempted first-degree murder. He's being held with no bond at this moment in the Newton detention facility. It looks like he does have a first appearance scheduled, will appear before a judge tomorrow. And this is really interesting to us tonight because we got this confirmation really just a few moments after we learned that the FBI today executed multiple search warrants in this case. So that's important to note because while we do have 1 arrest here, well, remember the authorities told us earlier today they thought there were multiple people involved with this. They've executed now today multiple search warrants, and we're hearing from the Catawba County Sheriff's Office just this evening. They say that they expect more arrests to come. So we think that there are going to be much more developments to talk about in this case. Something else interesting to note here, our team did some digging around and we were able to find that Mr. Killian has also been arrested this year for shooting into a crowd. And we actually shared this story with you, I remember, because it was just a few weeks ago, and it's a scary situation. There was in Hickory back in April, early April, a fight that police say that they got called to in a parking lot near a Chuck E. Cheese. And they were told that somebody had actually fired into the crowd, had shot into the crowd after this fight. Now, fortunately, nobody was hurt in this case. No one was hit by that gunfire. And police were able to track down a suspect vehicle. A description had been given to police. And they say that they tracked down the people responsible. The police tell us that one of the people responsible, 20-year-old Garen Nathaniel Killian. There was an 18-year-old who was also arrested here, and both of them faced a lot of charges in this case. 7 counts of attempted first-degree murder. There were 7 counts of assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill. There's a charge that's called armed to the terror of the people, so going armed to the terror of the public or to the people, and discharging a firearm in city limits. They were actually granted a bond in this case, but as of the last check that we had on this particular instance, they were remaining in jail. Obviously, that has changed, as we have now learned that police are accusing Mr. Killian of being involved with this mass shooting. So our crew is working on this for you tonight. We just urge you to keep it here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus, because as we shared throughout the evening, we're dipping in and out between our live feeds and also this case, making sure that you're getting the very latest information. We've moved one of our crews over to this story, so we're expecting more updates for you in the evening. Late evening newscast comes on here on WCNC Plus at 11, and so we're going to make sure that we're going to continue to dig for you over the next several hours and have the most updated information for you as you keep it here as the news at 11 flips over and turns on. So with that, we're going to dip back into some of our previous feeds that we were watching. I know we had this 3-box going for you a few moments ago. We've got the White House press secretary who's addressing multiple topics of note for the country. We have as well for you some severe weather that we've been watching out in the Midwest. Oklahoma City in particular, we're going to see some of the live drives hopefully throughout the evening. We actually are hearing that the severe weather, there's a tornado warning, flood warning, and severe thunderstorm watch. It's actually delayed the Indiana Pacers' arrival in Oklahoma City for the NBA Finals. We just learned that this evening. Their flight actually had to be diverted to Tulsa, Oklahoma. They had to refuel, and it sounds like they're going to try to attempt to come to Oklahoma City later tonight. So that's certainly something to watch on the severe weather front. So with that, we'll turn you back to the White House Press Secretary, Caroline Leavitt, who, as we mentioned, is addressing
We're not going to
multiple topics of note.
negotiate through the media out of respect for these ongoing discussions and negotiations that Special Envoy Witkoff is leading. The president made his position very clear on Truth Social last night. In fact, it couldn't be any more clear, and I would reiterate that's his position. Special Envoy Witkoff sent a very detailed and acceptable proposal to the Iranian regime that the president hopes they will accept, and if not, they will face grave consequences, as the president himself has reiterated. Sure.
Thanks, Caroline.
You're welcome.
A couple of things, if I may. Firstly, can you confirm whether or not President Trump is going to be going to the NATO summit in The Hague later this month?
I can confirm he will be going to the NATO summit, yes.
Okay, great, thanks. And another question on the Netherlands, in fact. Just wondering if you have any reaction to the collapse of the Dutch government there after the anti-EU and anti-Islam leader Geert Wilders, who's been described as the Dutch Trump, pulled out of the government there.
I don't have a comment on that, but certainly we should and we will get you one, okay?
Thanks.
You're welcome. Brett.
Thanks, Caroline. I wanted to ask, a couple days ago, the president announced that he was withdrawing the nomination of Jared Isaacman to lead NASA, citing a thorough review of prior associations. I wondered, why did this review happen just now, after the nominee was so far into the process? And can you explain the president's thinking on who he might choose?
Look, the president reserves the right to nominate individuals to key administration posts. He also reserves the right to remove those individuals if he chooses, just like he reserves the right to fire anybody in the executive branch that he wants. And so a new replacement for NASA will be announced very soon, as the president himself said.
Was there something in particular that came up that caused the president concern with this nomination?
The president wants to ensure that all of his nominees are aligned fully with the America First mission of this administration. And again, he will be announcing a replacement very soon. Andrew, go ahead.
Thank you, Caroline.
You're welcome.
It's been just about a month since President and Prime Minister Starmer announced...
I can't see you all the way back there. Phil's head is in the way. There you go.
So it's been just about a month since Prime Minister Starmer and President Trump announced that the U.S. and U.K. had reached a trade deal, or at least a framework for the deal. Now there are at least some conservative MPs in London who are complaining that Parliament has not yet seen the text of any deal. So I'd like to ask you from this side of the pond, is there a text for the deal ready to be released, submitted? And if not, when can we expect it? And then I have one more.
There's most definitely text with this deal. There is language that this side has seen. You'll have to ask the UK Parliament why they haven't seen it from their own government. I obviously can't answer that question.
And on Caroline, one more on Ukraine,
Go ahead,
please.
Jonathan. Sure, go ahead.
On Ukraine, it's been a couple days since Ukraine made that audacious drone strike on Russian airfields. The president hasn't said a word about it, and usually he's not shy about making his thoughts known on the war. Or, it's not bad. On the war or any other subject. What have you heard from him on this audacious drone strike? Is he surprised? He said that Zelensky didn't have the cards when they met in the Oval Office a few months back. Does Zelensky possibly have some cards that the president hadn't known about?
Look, the president's thinking on the Russia-Ukraine war as it stands, I spoke to him about it just this morning, is he remains positive at the progress that we've seen. Again, he urged both leaders to sit down and talk directly with one another, and they did that. Russia handed over a memorandum of peace, or a peace plan, or a suggestion of one, I understand, to the Ukrainian side. They also agreed upon the exchange of prisoners or hostages from each other's countries. So he remains positive about the progress that we're seeing, but he also is a realist, and he realizes these are two countries that are at war and have been for a long time because of his predecessor's weakness and incompetence. So he's working hard to solve this conflict, and that's where his mind is right now on it. Jonathan, go ahead.
Thank you. Same topic, just to put a finer point on it. Does President Trump approve of Ukraine's decision to strike nuclear-capable bombers in Russia?
I would like to let the president speak on that himself.
And just to follow up, has the president...
I would just add to that, the president does not want to see this war prolonged. He wants the fighting to stop, he wants people to stop dying, and he wants this to be solved at the negotiating table. The reason he is so deeply involved and has spent so much time and effort on this war is because he hates to see people dying. Again, these are not Americans that are being killed. These are Russians and these are Ukrainians. This is a war very far away. But this president truly cares about peace, and that's what he wants to see.
What is President Trump doing to ensure that a similar internal drone attack doesn't happen here in the US, given this was done at pretty low cost, very stealthily? You know, it obviously raises questions about our own security, particularly for US aircraft here.
It absolutely does, and that's why the president nominated Secretary Hegseth and has approved some of the changes that have been made at the Pentagon to ensure that we have the most lethal fighting force in the world, and that the United States military is the best, the biggest. That's why he wants the One Big Beautiful Bill to be passed, because it increases our defense spending. It's why he also launched the announcement of the Golden Dome to prevent from missile strikes and attacks in the future. And the president has a full understanding, I can tell you because I've spoken to him about it, about the future of warfare and how drones are a big part of that. And I will not get ahead of our policy team, but I think you can expect to see some executive action on that front in the very near future.
Caroline.
Caitlin.
2 questions for you as well. On the Big Beautiful Bill, you said recently that it is, quote, blatantly wrong to say that it adds to the deficit. You essentially said that an estimate from the Congressional Budget Office and other scorekeepers you believe are wrong. But Republicans like Ron Johnson and Rand Paul disagree. They are saying that it will add to the deficit. That is their concern. Is the White House's position that those 2 Republican senators are, quote, blatantly wrong?
It is. Those senators, it's not news that they disagree with this president on policy, and the president has vocally called them out for it and for their not having their facts together. I would add the Congressional Budget Office has been historically wrong. In fact, they predicted the Trump tax cuts from the president's first term in 2017. Their prediction was wrong by $500 billion. Those tax cuts had nearly $500 billion more of revenue than the Congressional Budget Office scored. And I would also point out, I don't think many people know this, there hasn't been a single staffer in the entire Congressional Budget Office that has contributed to a Republican since the year 2000. But guess what? There have been many staffers within the Congressional Budget Office who have contributed to Democrat candidates and politicians every single cycle since. So unfortunately, this is an institution in our country that has become partisan and political, and we are very confident in our own economic analyses of this bill. There is $1.6 trillion in savings, and our Office of Management and Budget Director, Russ Vaught, is a fiscal hawk. He is well known in this city for being a well-respected fiscal hawk. He has tools at his disposal to produce even more savings. And as you know, the White House will be sending our rescissions package to Capitol Hill today.
And on immigration, the other day that the Homeland Security Secretary said, and I'm quoting her now, that an illegal alien threatened to assassinate President Trump and highlighted his arrest. A man has now admitted to framing him, saying that he wrote the letter that the DHS Secretary Christina posted online. Last I checked before I came into the room, that post was still up from DHS. Does the White House expect them to issue a clarification or a correction on that
We
front?
can ask the Department of Homeland Security and get back to you. Jeff.
Caroline, is the United States putting pressure on China to release its hold on rare earths that are hurting car companies and technology companies now that require that for their products, and is that pressure working?
Well, I can assure you that the administration is actively monitoring China's compliance with the Geneva Trade Agreement. I know the United States, on our end, we have complied with the terms that we set, and our administration officials continue to be engaged in correspondence with their Chinese counterparts. And as you all know, and I know there's a lot of interest in it, there will be a leader-to-leader talk very soon. And when that happens, as always, we will let you know.
Also in Asia, just does the White House have a reaction to the results of the election in South Korea?
Yes, we do. In fact, let me find it here for you. It should be somewhere in here. Thank you. We do not, but I will get you one, Jeff. Go ahead.
Thanks, Caroline. Two questions on trade. Is this letter that was sent to trading partners a sign that the president isn't satisfied with the pace of these negotiations? Is he trying to light a fire under these talks now?
Well, look, the president has been very direct to our trading partners in his conversations with them and with foreign leaders directly that they need to cut deals with the United States of America. The tariff agenda of this president, he believes very strongly in it. And as you've all seen, he's unafraid to use tariffs to protect our industry and protect our workers, but he wants to see these tailor-made deals be signed. And I will tell you, of course, I never want to be the one negotiating with the press about these internal discussions and deliberations, but our team, who is deeply involved in this, sees these deals moving in the right direction. In fact, Ambassador Greer is in Paris right now meeting with many of our trading partners.
So we should still expect this flurry of deals in the next 36 days, and the plan is still for those full tariffs to go back into effect on July 9th.
The plan is for the announcement of these deals to be made very, very soon. Yes. Sure.
Thank you, Caroline.
You're welcome.
So Governor Whitmer confirmed that she spoke with President Trump about the possibility of pardoning the plotters against her, the kidnapping case. She didn't give us an idea of what the president's reaction was to that. Do you have any information about what he said?
Well, I won't reveal the president's private discussion unless he gives me liberty to, but I will reiterate what he said publicly when he was asked by one of the journalists in this room in the Oval Office a couple of weeks ago about the pardons. He said it's something he would look at, nothing more, nothing less. Haley, go ahead.
Thanks, Caroline.
And then to Kelly next to you.
Thank you. When it comes to the leader-to-leader call with Xi Jinping this week, what is the president's expectation of this call? Is he looking for concrete outcomes out of this, or is he looking to kind of warm relations as these trade talks are ongoing?
Well, President Trump and President Xi have shared a respectful relationship throughout the years. And again, I won't get ahead of the president on that call, but as always, after, you'll hear directly from the president or from myself or someone else here at the White House. Kelly.
Caroline, thank you. I want to get back to the anti-Semitic behavior that's been going on college campuses, as well as recently in Boulder, Colorado. The president, as you know, has the White House Faith Office, the Religious Liberty Commission, as well as the Anti-Task Force on anti-Christian bias, which includes anti-Semitism. From a whole-of-government perspective, and the president has already mentioned how he hates these kinds of acts that have been going on, can these entities and these agencies work together with the president to put out a proactive campaign to help people stop the hate?
I think the president himself has been leading on this. Kellyanne has been incredibly clear in his rhetoric that he is not going to tolerate such hate or behavior in the United States of America. And you will see that rhetoric being followed up by action from the Department of Justice, who is seeking to prosecute these cases to the fullest extent of the law. And I know the Attorney General and the FBI Director were very quick to call this what it was, targeted terrorism. And there was some, I think, criticism from the media and well, at least pundits I saw on television saying, are they too quick to jump here? No. They see the facts and they reveal those to the American people, and they're transparent. And I think, frankly, that's a breath of fresh air from what we experienced in the previous administration.
Are there programs that they can put in place to campaign against this kind of violence, to actually take the whole approach and say, we want to get ahead of you. If you're thinking it, don't do it. And if you're going to do it, sit down and talk to someone within the faith office, within the Religious Liberty Commission, as well as the task force.
Yeah, surely. It's a good idea, and I'll pass it along to them. Peter.
Thank you, Caroline. When you look at these last-minute Biden pardons, the big ones, Biden siblings, Fauci, January 6th committee.
That's right.
Most of the big ones have the same very neat signature. We would expect that probably to be the auto pen. There is one that looks different. It looks authentic. In fact, if you look at the last name, it almost looks like the president was having a hard time spelling.
Live Impact News on WCNC Plus, breaking in with brand new information in this mass shooting in Hickory from over the weekend. If you've been following our stream tonight here on WCNC Plus, we've gotten confirmation this evening from authorities that there's been an arrest made in this deadly mass shooting from Hickory that happened very early Sunday morning. We've told you before, 20-year-old Garen Nathaniel Killian of Lenoir is facing a charge of attempted first-degree murder in this case. We just got a look at a mugshot here. And we want to be transparent with you because this is actually a mugshot that we found from a prior case. So this is not the booking mugshot from the arrest that we learned about today. We are working on getting a look at that mugshot from this recent mass shooting case, but as we've been sharing before, we've been able to, by our own reporting, look into the archives and see that Mr. Killian has actually been accused of shooting into a crowd before. This actually was an incident we told you about back in April here on WCNC Plus. There was a situation where police say they were called to a parking lot near a Chuck E. Cheese in Hickory and said that there was a fight that was reported and somebody had fired shots into the crowd following that fight. We shared before, fortunately, nobody was hurt in that shooting, but police say that they were able to track down people they believe were connected to that shooting into a crowd, and 20-year-old Garen Nathaniel Killian of Lenoir was one of the arrests police say they made. There was an 18-year-old who was also arrested in this case out of Hickory. Now, in this case, from back in April, Killian was charged with 7 counts of attempted first-degree murder. There were 7 counts of assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill. There's a charge called going armed to the terror of the public, which, by the way, sounds like a wild charge, but our Verify team actually looked into this several months back. So if you'd like to check out a deep dive into that charge, our Megan Bragg actually looked into it. You can find that reporting on WCNC.com and inside the WCNC Charlotte mobile app. Mr. Killian also charged with discharging a firearm within the city limits. He actually was granted a bond in this case, but remained in jail for at least a period of time after that. Although we can see with the new charges in this recent case, seemingly somehow potentially got out of jail. So we have for you a few other details to share here. So alongside news of this arrest, we've heard from the FBI. There have been multiple search warrants executed today. The Catawba County Sheriff's Office is telling us that they don't believe that the arrest is going to stop with Killian. They think that there's going to be more arrests. So we're going to keep a close eye on anything that comes from authorities. By the way, you're looking there on the right, the mugshot from back in April, and scene video from just after that shooting. You could see really large police presence. And quite frankly, we spoke with folks in the neighborhood this week, even as recently as today. We had crews out there again They were telling us they were feeling very uneasy. They didn't like the fact that there weren't, at the time, any arrests made in this case and that the potential suspects were still out there. Well, now we see one suspect, according to police, in custody and the potential for more arrests coming. We don't know where the search warrants were executed, by the way. Were they all in the Catawba County area? Did they span maybe multiple counties? We don't know any of that. We do know that there are multiple agencies working on this, including the FBI. With that, we should also tell you, too, that the FBI does have this $15,000 reward that we've shared with you this week, more details about for any information that might lead to an arrest. We don't know if a tip led to this arrest. Is someone going to get the reward now? As far as we can tell, the reward is still out there. The website that the FBI set up to send in video tips. So remember, agencies now working on this case, they're trying to get more ring camera footage. Did someone take cell phone video in that area around that evening? We have information, by the way, if you look up our web story on this, WCNC.com, WCNC Charlotte mobile app. We have the radius that folks are being asked to check their surveillance footage from early Sunday morning to see if they have any footage and send it to a website, which is fbi.gov/Catawba County Shooting. fbi.gov/Catawba County Shooting. So to our knowledge, folks are still being encouraged to drop any video in that website, in that essentially electronic tip line. And also new for you this evening, Live Impact News on WCNC Plus has been able to confirm that the baseball team, the minor league team, Hickory Crawdads, held a moment of silence for the person who passed away in this shooting. So we shared before, this mass shooting unfortunately killed one person. It did injure 11 others. Last check that we heard from authorities, most of the people, all but one essentially, have been released from the hospital. But there was one person who sadly lost his life, and we heard that the Hickory Crawdads today held a moment of silence. We actually reached out to the team to see if we could get any more details about that, and we received response back from a staff member who shared, yes, they did have a moment of silence for Mr. Sean Hood, who was 58 years old, just before their game. So we have a crew who's working on this for you this evening. So we always urge people to keep it here on Live Impact News. You never know, just like now, when we're going to pop in with brand new information. We'll be continuing to work here over the next several hours, of course, until our 11 p.m. news, as we come on as usual here on WCNC Plus at 11 with the latest news of the day. Our Siobhan Riley is going to be digging into the very latest. And our team, as we've kind of illustrated for you, is hard at work, combing through everything, trying to make sure that you have all of the details that you need to know as soon as we know the information. So just to kind of recap here, one arrest now made in that mass shooting from Hickory over the weekend that happened, authorities say, during a pool party. The person is a 20-year-old man. Killian is the last name. We showed you the mugshot. That mugshot, by the way, once again, from April, where Mr. Killian was charged with shooting into a crowd, basically in a Chuck E. Cheese in the Hickory area. So with that, stick with us here on Live Impact News. We've got a lot to bring to you tonight. We've shared some of the weather that we're keeping an eye on. We want to tease you with this too, because in just a few moments, we actually have Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich joining us here in the Live Impact News studio, and he'll be talking about a lot of important topics, including hurricane season. We've got a system that our team is watching right now, potentially in the tropics, so that's going to be of note. And we're also watching some severe weather out in the Heartlands area in the Midwest, so actually we're seeing some of the live drives coming back. So at some point we might be able to dip in, just keep you updated on some of the tornado warnings we're seeing out in Oklahoma City, flood watch, severe thunderstorm watch. But all that's to say, it's a busy evening here on Live Impact News. We've got a new feed popping into our studio right now, and so this comes to us from the Compass event. So this is happening in Washington, D.C. Looks like we have Secretary of State Marco Rubio speaking right now. We know J.D. Vance is there, the Vice President. This is a gala hosted by a think tank associated with the conservative labor movement. It's called American Compass. So let's listen right now to Secretary of State Marco Rubio speaking tonight.
Exuberance, the belief that the Cold War is over, we won, and now the entire world is going to become just like us. Free enterprise democracies. That was a very idealistic thing to believe. But here's the other conclusion they made, and that is that nationhood no longer mattered when it came to economics. That right now the world would no longer have borders. It wouldn't matter where things were made. What mattered is they were made in the most efficient place. And it became mantra. And look, I think it became part of Republican orthodoxy for a very long time, an orthodoxy that I came up in, which was it's okay if productive capacity moves to another country, because what that will do is it will free up our workers to do work that's even more productive and pays them more. It was the famous or the infamous idea that who cares that you lost your job at a factory, you're going to learn how to code, and then you're going to make a lot more money doing that. Well, it was completely unrealistic, number one, and became incredibly disruptive that decision was made. But here's the other implication of it. It robbed the nation of its industrial capacity, of its ability to make things. And its industrial capacity and its ability to make things has two ramifications. The first is it hurts your economy. It hurts your country. It robs people of jobs, and the transition is not nearly as easy, but it also ends up becoming corrosive and destructive to communities. And as a result, we had a Rust Belt. We had places that were gutted. And we had families that for generations had worked in a certain field or for a certain company, and all of a sudden that company or that field vanished because it moved somewhere else where it was cheaper to do, and those jobs were gone, and obviously became incredibly destructive, not just for the United States, by the way, but for many nations in the industrialized West. But the other thing it robbed us of is the ability to make things, which is a national security impairment, and a very significant one. If you go back to the World War II, the admiral who had been tasked with planning Pearl Harbor thought it was a really bad idea. He went through and obviously followed orders, but he thought it was a very bad idea because he had spent a substantial amount of time studying in the United States when he was younger. And his conclusion was that attacking the United States was a bad idea because even though at the time militarily we were behind the Japanese, certainly technologically and otherwise, we had factories. And we had access to raw material and resources. And he knew that over time, once those factories and those raw materials were put to the war machine, the Japanese would not be able to keep up. And you could very well argue that the end of World War II, that the victory in World War II, both in Europe and especially in Asia, was the result of America's industrial capacity. When the Japanese lost the plane, they lost the plane. When we lost the plane, and their planes were better than ours for a long time, when we lost the plane, we were able to produce hundreds to replace it. Industrial capacity mattered in terms of national security. And that's never changed. That's always been true. And so today, what you find is because of all of those years of neglect, because of the loss of industrial capacity, we didn't just undermine our society. We didn't just undermine our domestic economy. We've undermined our position in the world. And what you will find, and what we find even now, is that increasingly, on geopolitical issue after geopolitical issue, it is access to raw material and industrial capacity that is at the core both of the decisions that we're making and the areas that we're prioritizing. Now, the technologies are different, but nonetheless, that is what we're increasingly prioritizing. And that's become really apparent to me. I think it was even going into this job, but in the months that I've been there, on place after place, every country in the world is now pitching themselves as a source of rare earth minerals. Every country in the world, by the way, they're not that rare, so every country has access to it, but it's become a big, that alone is not enough, because you have to have access to rare earth minerals, but then you have to have the ability to process them, and you have to make them into usable material. And frankly, what the Chinese have done over the last 25 or 30 years is they've cornered the market. And this is one of the true challenges to sort of pure free enterprise view of these things. You cannot compete with a nation state who has decided they're not interested in making money. They're not interested in making money in this field. They are interested in the short term in dominating the market, being the sole source provider for the world of a certain product. Because once you establish industry dominance in any one of these fields, you can charge the world whatever you want. Now, one thing is if we said, well, this happened because they're just better than us. But that's not why it happened. It happened because we literally gave it away. because we made the decision, we made the policy decision that it was okay. We were okay with 80-something% of the active ingredients in most of our generic pharmaceuticals coming from another country. We were okay with giving that away. We were okay with giving away all kinds of things like that. And now we are in a crunch. And I say we, I mean the rest of the world is in a crunch, because we have realized that our industrial capability is deeply dependent on a number of potential adversary nation states, including China, who can hold it over our head. And so in many ways, the nature of geopolitics is now adjusted.
Breaking in here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus to bring you yet another breaking update to a story we've been following for a few weeks now here on WCNC Plus. We just got a statement from the Charlotte Mecklenburg Fraternal Order of Police, which explains how their vote of confidence went regarding their confidence in Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Chief Johnny Jennings. We shared that this vote started essentially on Memorial Day. It was online. It started on Monday, and then they started to hold in-person voting at the lodge in Charlotte for a period of, I believe it was 9 days. But this is related to the settlement that we learned about, of course, the $305,000 settlement. And the FOP is telling us tonight they actually didn't get enough people to vote to be able to validate an outcome, is how they put it. So they didn't really explain in this statement what comes next, whether they're going to vote again or this is just it and the situation is done. But they say here, over the last 9 days, FOP conducted this vote of confidence against CMPD Police Chief Johnny Jennings. They offered numerous opportunities for members to vote in person and online. They concluded tonight, and the number of the votes that they received, not enough to validate an outcome. By the way, this is part of a long, drawn-out saga, as we've explained. We have a lot more information that you can check out on WCNC.com and inside the WCNC Charlotte mobile app, because it does stem from this settlement. As we shared before here on Live Impact News several days ago, we learned about the settlement and essentially a separation agreement in which the police chief is going to retire at the end of the year. So there's a lot that you can dive into with our body of reporting from our team of reporters on this story. We just want to make sure that we had that update for you, since a lot of folks were interested in this. And we should mention, regardless of what the outcome would have been, it was essentially an informal type of vote. It wouldn't have had an actual impact on literal impact on the police chief's job, but it does speak to how the police force itself feels about the leadership of the chief. And we have reported today that this is the farthest that a vote of this type has gone when it comes to CMPD police chief. So we'll keep you updated as we get more information on that. We'll turn you back now to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who's speaking at this gala in D.C. This is for a think tank associated with the conservative labor movement.
But then we kept it going. And so today there are multiple countries around the world that are fully developed economies, but whom we have enormous trade imbalances because they want to continue that system moving along, and that has to be corrected. But here's the final point, and here's why this is also critical, because not only did we take out nation-state interest and the national interest out of our economic policies, we also took it out of the way we made foreign policy decisions. The idea that our foreign policy, depending on the place and on the issue, should be centered and focused primarily on what is good for the United States was completely lost. Time and again, we made decisions in foreign policy because of what was good for the international order, or what was good for the world. And I'm not saying those things are irrelevant, but the number one priority of our foreign policy of the United States, the number one foreign policy priority of the United States needs to be the United States and what's in the best interest of the United States. That's not isolationism, that's common sense. On the contrary, in order to do that, we have to engage in the world. But we need to engage in the world in a way that prioritizes our national interest above all else. And the reason why we do that goes back to my point at the outset of this with human nature. And that is that that's what other countries do all the time. Virtually every single nation state we interact with prioritizes their national interest in their interactions with us. And we need to begin to do that again, and we're beginning to do that again, prioritizing the national interest of the United States above everything else in making these foreign policy decisions. And I'll close by saying that's where foreign policy works best. As I've said to multiple foreign leaders, including some with whom we haven't had engagements with for many years, I said the way foreign policy works best is when our national interests are aligned. When they're aligned, that's where we have incredible opportunity for partnership together. And when they're not aligned, that's where I expect them to pursue their national interests and us to pursue ours, and to do so peacefully if possible, and that's the work of diplomacy. And so I think the work you have done to reorient our thinking towards the national interests, both in our domestic economic policies as well as in our foreign policies, is critical work for 21st century conservatism. And I thank you for all the work you've provided. You've done great work when no one else was talking about these things, when no one else was providing the material that allowed us to build public policy and challenge thinking. You were doing it. And I encourage you to continue to do it, because this is going to be the work of a generation. There's still much work to be done. We are in the midst of an important and long overdue realignment in our thinking in American politics. And it takes organizations like American Compass to drive the innovation and the thinking. And we appreciate everything you've done up to this point and encourage you to continue to do that. And one of the people who has really been a leader in this regard, someone who I actually got to know as part of this project and this thinking, back when he was only a best-selling author and not even a political figure yet, is our current vice president, who is doing a phenomenal job, and someone who I've grown tremendous. My admiration for him has grown tremendously. I admired him before. I admired him in the Senate. I admire him a lot more now as vice president, because I think vice presidents are just more impressive than senators, Bernie. That's how. But I can say that now that I got 99 votes. I don't need their votes anymore. But the vice president's doing a phenomenal job, and I think is one of the most powerful and clearest voices in the world, really at the edge, at the leading edge of this new thinking in American politics. And it's my honor to serve with him in this administration, and it's my honor to invite him onto the stage now to speak to all of you. So thank you for the opportunity to be here, ladies and gentlemen, the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Sit here. Yeah. Great. Great to see you all. I think the last time I was in here was the night before the inauguration. We had a dinner in here, and it was so tightly packed that you actually couldn't get up to go to the bathroom or request an additional glass of water. That's how tightly packed we were in here. And you guys are doing pretty good, actually. Maybe not that tight, but comfortable. But you're doing good.
Tastefully packed.
That's well,
happy medium.
Before you say whatever introductory thing you were going to say, I'm sure Orrin has a spiel. Orrin always has a spiel, but I just want to say thanks to Secretary Rubio for the very kind words of introduction. So, Marco, I was very fond of him as a Senate colleague, but you learn a lot about somebody when you see them actually operate behind the scenes. And Marco is, if anything, more impressive privately than he is publicly, which is very hard to do. But he's very thoughtful. He actually listens, which is a rare skill in politics. We're very good at talking. Us politicians, we're not so good often at listening. He's just a very, very important part of what the president and I are trying to do. And so thrilled to have him here. And as you know, I think one of the first times I ever met, maybe the first time I ever met Marco, was in a conference room in his Senate office with Mike Needham and Orrin Cass, talking about some of the very things we're talking about here tonight and some of the very things that American Compass is focusing on. So it's kind of amazing to see it come full circle to where we are today.
Well, that's a perfect segue into my spiel, so great. Thank you. I had a few different spiels we could start with, but this is a good one. We are thrilled to have you here. I am thrilled to have this opportunity to talk with you, and so grateful that the work you're doing, and in a sense so in awe of it, because there are politicians out there who they've just been politicians, but you are someone who was an intellectual first. Some people don't like the word intellectual, but I mean it in the good sense of the term. You were writing for National Review. You were at the bar late at night arguing about and helping shape these ideas that you are now.
I come here for free and you insult me and you call me an intellectual. Remind me that I wrote for National Review. What an asshole this guy is.
That's fair. I will admit that I too wrote for National Review. But as I said in my introductory remarks earlier, I have no higher compliment than this guy likes to argue. So that is, it's a wonderful thing, and I think it really distinguishes you as someone who not just cares about and believes in these ideas, but has formed them.
Sure.
And so, I wanted to ask you a little bit about some of the substance of what's going on in a few of these topics, but also ask a little bit about sort of how your thinking has gotten here and how being in the role you're in now affects that, and what people who are not in that role need to understand to do it well. And so let's start here on the substance, though, because obviously trade is in the news from time to time. Trade is, and I think you've articulated this well, trade is one element of what is a much broader project about reshoring, reindustrialization. I want to ask you, how do you define that project? What is the broader goal that the trade agenda is part of, and where do you see it ultimately going if it's going to be successful?
Yeah, so first of all, congrats. I see here on the screen, this is the 5-year anniversary of American Compass. You guys have accomplished a lot in 5 years, and I'm going to echo what Secretary Rubio said. Keep doing it, because it really has influenced my thinking. It's influenced the thinking of multiple people within the administration. And if I were to try to summarize the project, I think there are a few different things going on, but maybe one thing that really worries me is you have, I think, in many ways, stagnating living standards for normal Americans, for the median worker, for people who just want to start a family, work in a decent job, earn a living salary, and have dignified work. I think you've seen so many pieces of evidence of stagnation in the lives of the normal people that we serve, right? The people who actually go to work, who keep the country running. And there are different ways to sort of measure this, but I think my favorite way of measuring it actually is probably you see stagnating productivity in this country for about 50 years, okay? And I think there are a whole host of reasons why you see that. I think, number one, we've offshored a whole host of industries, and so you see less innovation in a lot of the critical manufacturing sectors that actually drive the American economy. I think part of it is we've really underinvested in technology, especially in, the heavily regulated spaces. I think part of that is we've really harmed energy production in our own country. That's a critical part of, the heavily regulated space is actually doing well because the cost inputs of these industries are so heavily dependent on the price of energy. So there are all these different policy spins that I could put on it, but I just want normal people who work hard and play by the rules to have a good life. And I think that was very, very possible in the United States of America that I was growing up in, but you started to see some signs that it was fraying. And I think it got a lot worse over the course of the 90s and 2000s. And that has got to change. And I think that's fundamentally why Donald Trump is the president of the United States, is because he was the first mainstream American politician to come along and say, this isn't working. These trade deals are not working for the normal people who power our economy. Our policies have not been productive either in the economic, national security, or diplomatic space. So it's complicated. The answer to your question is complicated. Summarizing it is necessarily very hard. But I think the best way to summarize it is we just want normal people to have a good life.
That seems reasonable.
Thank you.
There you have it, folks. I think that's obviously exactly right. I think it's remarkable that is or has been a heterodox view to some extent, that it's something that has had to be said. Especially after your book came out, as you had a chance to talk with a lot of folks in a lot of different contexts, then as you moved into running as a politician yourself, you had a chance to speak both with the normal people for whom this was not working, and for a lot of people who either thought it was working or didn't care.
Sure.
My own sense is there's actually more thought it was working than didn't care. That for most of them, they're not bad people so much as oblivious. But I'm curious what your experience has been engaging with those folks. But how would you describe, what did they look out at America and see, and what is helpful in communicating to them why this is a problem and why they need to care?
Yeah, so let me give you kind of an elite answer to that question, and let me give you just a sort of normal political answer to the question. So the elite answer to the question, I remember, Warren, talking to you about starting American Compass 5 years ago. And I think one of the things that we talked about, I don't know if you remember this, but, you know, what is the audience of donors, because these things cost money, funding fellowships and smart people to write papers and think about this stuff like that costs resources. Like, what is the universe of donors who would actually support something like this? And I think my takeaway of the last 5 years is actually quite a bit. And I think there's an assumption among, whether you call it populists or whether you call it, you know, sort of trade hawks or like whatever label you want to put on it, there's this assumption that donors are fundamentally misaligned. And I actually think donors are much more pragmatic, and they see this stuff not necessarily because, you know, they're reading like a paper that Bob Lighthizer published 15 or 20 years ago. And I know Bob's in the audience and I love Bob. But because like they do business in China and they know how hard it is to actually get a fair deal for their companies, or, you know, they've seen some of the ways in which, you know, I met with an industry leader today who was talking about all of the ways in which transshipping through non-Chinese Asian economies is destroying his very successful manufacturing business. And he's not worried about it for himself because his business is so successful, but he's worried about it for his industry writ large because some of his competitors are going to have their businesses destroyed. He doesn't want that. So there's a bit there. I think one thing to take away is that people are much less ideological and much more pragmatic than I think that a lot of intellectuals give them credit for. So that's one thing I take away. I think the other thing that I take away from it is the American people are much more aligned with our way of thinking about things than people realize. And I think the misalignment between the normal American and the talking heads in Washington is still so profound. And I'll give you an example of this. One of the very first truly political speeches I gave when I was thinking about running for Senate in Ohio back in 2021, I spoke to this group in Butler County, Ohio. It's actually the county that I was born and raised in southwestern Ohio. And I was talking about how, you know, big tech was a major problem. Censorship of viewpoints was a major problem, and we needed to get serious about antitrust, and we need to get serious about actually treating these companies as the monopolists that they were. And a person came up to me afterwards and they said, "Oh, I really liked what you said, but I didn't agree with what you said on big tech." And I sort of assumed that I was about to, sort of hear a kind of libertarian argument from the pages of the National Review. And what the guy said is,
all right, folks, we're going to pivot away from this gala in D.C. with the Vice President speaking to talk about weather impacts. And so as we mentioned here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus a little bit earlier this evening, we were expecting Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich to join us, and he is here. And we've got a bit to talk about. Of course, we have got hurricane season that's underway, so we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But as far as the present, you've been keeping an eye on some impacts for folks in the Carolinas, and we're actually seeing some really interesting, beautiful views on our live cameras, which I'm sure you can pull up yourself, but the sunset is looking gorgeous right now.
Actually, when I got back in, I saw the Louisville cameras, or Anson County camera, and it was looking straight at the sunset, and you had this nice red ball and the glow in the sky, and it was a perfect example of what we see when we have smoke or dust or even pollution or even volcanic eruptions.
Yeah.
Anytime you have that in the atmosphere at sunset, you got to remember when the sun gets lower in the horizon, it's looking through all of the atmosphere. When it's straight above our head, that's the thinnest part of the atmosphere. So we're looking through all that. And so what happens, the reds and oranges get scattered back at us. So we have this really cool graphic kind of explains how this works. And, you know, in the middle of the day, you see kind of blue skies. But when you're at sunset, the reds and oranges of the spectrum come at your eye. And so we kind of associate that with sunrise and sunset in general. But the more vivid they are is usually because there's more of this pollution, either dust, in this case it's Sierra dust, as well as Canadian wildfire smoke, which there's been a ton of lately. This is like the second summer in the last 3 years where we've had a ton of this smoke.
Yeah, I mean, and to dive a bit deeper into this phenomenon, I mean, you explained it to me because I remember, I think I asked you during a commercial break this week during the evening news about, the actual name of the
so-
effect, and it's why the sky's blue and why this is red when we
You
see
probably
the dust
remember
particles.
this from like 8th grade science, Raleigh and Meese scattering. It's the type of scattering that light has because sunlight in and of itself is white. And so white is actually all of the colors, right? And so if you filter out some of them, you get some of that colors of the rainbow. In this case, the smoke, the dust, whatever particles are in the atmosphere filters all of those out except for the reds and oranges. Now, in the middle of the day, we get the opposite. We filter out all the reds, the oranges, and we get the blues. And so we get that blue that is vivid. And never look at the sun, by the way. I always got to preface that.
Directly,
But if you
yes.
want to see the bluest part of the sky, look opposite of where the sun is in the sky. So if the sun is like to your right, look in the opposite part of the sky. That will be the bluest part of the sky because that's where the most blue is being scattered. And as your eye gets closer to sun without looking at it, you'll notice the sky gets more kind of milky white. And then if you were to look at the sun, which I don't ever recommend unless you got solar eclipse classes, it would look white. I mean, that's really what it looks like in reality. We think it's an orange glow, but it's actually white. That's the light that's coming from the sun.
Yeah, and I mean, it's pretty for us to see, but
Yeah.
we know that air quality is also an issue for, I mean, maybe for us, but also, I mean, I'm seeing like Minnesota last night
Yeah.
on the stream. We had a really, really hazy shot of Minneapolis.
Yeah, so they're unfortunate. They're closer to the fire, so the smoke's closer to the surface. By the time it gets down here, it's aloft. So you're not even smelling this. It's really not affecting our air quality much at all. Same goes for the Sierra dust layer, which is coming off of Africa, which comes by every summer. I'll show you where that plume is right now, actually. We have a pretty big plume of that coming across the Atlantic. And you'll see it kind of over the Caribbean right now. So it's heading towards Florida by Thursday, and it will kind of dissipate a little as it gets here. Now, I kind of joked on my social media that this has been all over the place, and people think it's like this crazy new thing, and it's not.
Yeah.
It's been around since we've been tracking it since the 60s. So,
Yeah.
and it happens all the time, and it's not a bad thing. The cool thing about Sahara dust, it's actually the research has shown that's the reason that the Amazon rainforest is so plentiful.
I
is
remember
that
seeing that.
the minerals and the fertilizer basically from the Sahara gets deposited in parts of South America, and it comes from the Sahara Desert. It also gets deposited in the Caribbean and helps with water quality and some of the other particles that we see in marine life. And when it gets here to the States, it typically causes hazy sunshine, kind of these vivid sunrise and sunsets. But the cool thing about it for hurricane season is because it's sand, it's essentially sand up in the atmosphere, it absorbs sunlight and heats up, and it creates a stable layer, and it deters hurricanes. So
That's
when we
good.
have a ton of it, it deters hurricanes. So it's actually a good thing. But early in the season like this, it doesn't really do much because June's not very active. If we
Yeah.
had this in like August or September,
Yeah.
that would be more beneficial. But don't think it's going to cancel all the hurricanes. Usually it's short-lived. It's just in and around the storms, and new ones will form around it. But it is a very common thing. So sometimes I think these terms become mainstream because of social media and because of all our access to information.
Yeah.
People hear it for the first time. They think it's some new thing. It's like the polar vortex, That's been in my meteorology.
cyclone.
Yeah, those are in my meteorological textbooks since I was in school. They're not new. It's just people are hearing about it
Yeah.
for the first time.
And it kind of sounds ominous too when you think
Oh,
about a
yeah.
big dust
Yeah.
cloud coming over your
Hey, let's face
community.
it. If you're in the media, you'll love those terms because it draws people in, and that's part of what we do.
But we also don't use bomb cyclone, I feel like, to our
No.
credit here in the WCNC Plus newsroom.
We don't really have many. I mean, if we get one, it would be like a nor'easter
Yeah.
type setup. But a bomb cyclone is just it's like the version of rapid intensification of a hurricane, but with a regular low pressure system. And so I think that's where we have all these cool terms. We have great terms in meteorology, and sometimes you just hear them for the first time and I think it's a good thing actually because now we talk about the science more. We don't try to withhold the information. Here's what we call it, sometimes I joke we call thunderstorm fuel. I'll tell you what it is. It's called CAPE. We call it a convectively available potential energy. Now nobody really knows what that is, but that's what it's called. And it's not as cool as bomb cyclone, but that's just thunderstorm fuel. It's just a cool term we have.
Well, I mean, you mentioned the hurricanes and
Yep.
how, the Saharan dust will impact that.
Yeah.
Speaking of hurricanes, we do have hurricane season that's
Yeah.
officially underway now. I know that you're keeping an eye, I think. Are you still keeping an eye on a system
Yeah, we've
for
got a little
us?
system off the coast that could develop. And what's interesting about this is pretty common as well early in the season. Let me see if I can pull up our probabilities here. Early in the season, what happens, if we're going to get an early season system like May, June, July, typically it's because we have a stalled front or a thunderstorm complex that goes out over the Gulf Stream or down into the Gulf itself. And if it festers there for a while, you can get a low pressure system to develop. And so we were watching that on the coast right now. We could see a weak low pressure system. Now, here's the good news. It's not going to be a hurricane. It may never become a tropical storm, but it will be a rain producer. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because in the coastal areas of North and South Carolina, they're in moderate drought still.
Yeah.
So they need the rain. They have not gotten the rain that we had in May in the western part of the state. So this would actually be a good thing, but it is going to cause rain on Thursday. So if you're going to the beach next week or this weekend, don't worry. This isn't going to be the thing that impacts your stay.
Yeah.
It's probably just going to be afternoon pop-up storms.
Okay. Well, we know you'll be watching that closely
Yeah.
for us. We have been telling folks here on WCNC Plus and on the air on our television platform as well, the fact that you all, with the Weather Impact Team, have put together a special for everyone to kind of get them prepared here for hurricane season and really just inform people, which I think is really special, is you kind of alluded to the fact that you get into the science and you kind of explain things so everyone can be smarter, I guess, about hurricanes.
I love this special because if you're familiar with our Weather IQ brand, this feels like one giant Weather IQ, but it's about hurricanes only. So that's why we call it Hurricane IQ. It's really informative, and we dive into the forecast, all the things you need to know about the season. And the whole reason we do these is it's one to inform, but this is the time to prepare. We want people to understand, like, hey, this is what's coming later this season. So right now in June, not a lot going on. Got a weak little system off the coast, but now is the time to put your emergency kits together, get prepared. And we look back at Helene, unfortunately, which is going to be one of these storms that I think people will be telling their grandkids about in Western North Carolina.
Yeah.
In some ways, there is some silver linings to Helene, because now I think everyone in the Western Carolinas is going to take every storm very seriously, almost to a fault. They're not going to discount storms. And I think it was a good wake-up call for a lot of people to realize, just like Hugo was in 1989, another H storm, that hurricanes affect inland areas. They're not coastal events. If there's one thing I could tell you, it is not just a coastal thing. We are seeing this trend where storm surge used to be the #1 killer in hurricanes, but now everybody gets away from the coast. So storm surge doesn't hit anybody. It destroys houses and causes damage, but there's nobody there to get injured or killed. The biggest danger now is freshwater flooding, which is from rainfall from inland areas. Because let's face it, if you live inland, you're not evacuating, you're just staying put, and you think it's on the coast, and then that storm stalls over you and you get 30 inches of rain, and then we have freshwater flooding. So freshwater flooding has become the #1 killer in hurricanes now, and that's an inland impact. That's not a coastal impact.
I feel like that's probably a reminder, of knowing your flood zone.
Yes.
Because you always hear the phrase, like, if it rains where you live, you need to know your flood zone.
And you should have flood insurance. That's, I think if there's one thing I could tell people, even if you're not in a flood zone, I remember talking to emergency manager, and he said something very similar to us. He's like, you should be ready to get flooding if you live where it rains. You don't have to live in a floodplain. Think about even in a metro area like Charlotte. If you don't live near Sugar Creek or McAlpine Creek, you think you're safe. But man, if that storm drain clogs in front of your house, your house could flood. I mean, I've seen it happen quickly. Urban flooding happens very fast because of all this impervious surface. And so flooding can happen anywhere. If it rains hard enough anywhere, Vanessa, you're going to get flooding.
Yeah.
It's just, that's the kind of rainfall rates we see in tropical systems, 3-4 inches of rain per hour. Doesn't matter where you are, you're going to get flooding. And Helene was a good example of that because, yes, there was a lot of flooding on these creeks and streams, but when you saw the pictures and videos that came in, there were people on the side of mountains where water's just literally running down the side of the mountain. They're not anywhere near a creek, but the water had nowhere to go, and they had what basically looked like a lahar, like you would see in a volcanic eruption. It's like a molten thing of, instead of lava, it's soil, it's dirt, and it's water, and it's flowing down the mountain. And that's what we saw a lot of in Helene. And so I think the good news is that people are going to take these storms seriously this year. But I will tell you this, there's not going to be another Helene. There could be a storm that could be worse than Helene, and there'll be a lot of storms that are less than Helene. But the exact same impacts never happen the exact same way twice. So you got to, because the reason I say that is I don't want people that went through Helene to think there's going to be another storm. But there's also people that made it out pretty good from Helene that the next one could be the one that impacts your property or you yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, I remember growing up too in Florida, and I worked in Florida in news for a long time, and we would always hear, our meteorologists there talk about the fact that you never want to compare storms, from one storm to another. And I know this is somewhat of a different tangent that I'm going to hop off on, but the fact that there's also the care in making sure that big impact storms, the names get retired so that people don't get confused. Because I think a lot of it too is not just knowing the science, but also being able to communicate the messaging to the public just to make sure that people react accordingly.
No, you're exactly right. That's why the names are retired, because we don't want, every 6 years we recycle the names unless it's retired.
Yeah.
So 6 years from now, imagine if we didn't eliminate Helene from the list. Everybody who went through Helene would think, oh my gosh, it's happening again. Yeah. And there's also the flip side of that, and we saw this with Hugo. There's people that said, well, Helene was bad. I know it was bad for those people, but I made it out okay. So then they let their guard down, and maybe the next Helene is going to be the one, like I said, that gets you. So there's this dichotomy of like, hey, it's not going to be as bad as this was this past storm, but it could be worse for other people that weren't even impacted by Helene. So that's why it's always important. Every storm is different. And it's a good reason I don't like to compare storms, because I don't want to set the expectations that you're going to see the same impacts with the next one, because every time they're different. They're either worse or they're better. They're usually never the same.
Yeah. I know that we've obviously been trying to prepare folks for hurricane season from an educational standpoint. Yeah. Will you be going through with the special some of the things that people should have, like physically in their possession as they get ready for hurricane
we talk
season?
A little bit about that kit. We definitely give you the advice. The Red Cross does a great job of putting together a list. And I will tell you, having done a lot of these talks with emergency managers and hurricane preparedness, one of the biggest things that emergency managers are fearful of, especially in urban settings. You think in Charlotte, in the mountains, people are used to being kind of off the grid. So when they were without power for 2 weeks, it was bad, but they were kind of somewhat prepared. I tell you what, we can't go 48 hours in Charlotte without power before there's going to be major problems, from food spoilage to medical devices to just transportation. So in an urban setting, being without power is probably the biggest thing you need to be prepared for. So do you have non-perishable food items? Do you have drinking water? Do you have medication? Do you have enough cash for a couple of days? We're not in a big cash society, but people say, well, how much cash do I need? Well, if you're going to a hotel or other place, your credit cards are still going to work. Where cash comes in handy is buying fuel and food. And when you need it right away, because those are two things you need right away, and usually the quickest way to get those is with cash. So those are the things I would think about, like how would you survive with 2 or 3 days without power? What would you need? And that's what I would want you to be prepared for, and prepare for your whole family, your pets as well. Remember, we're looking out for our furry friends. They're going to need food, water, shelter as well. So those are the kind of things I think people should be thinking about. And the great thing about preparing for that, we hope that never happens, right? But we could have a power outage for a completely different reason: a tornado, a thunderstorm, a solar storm, just grid failure. I mean, we've had that happen where just hacks on the system. So this kit could come in handy for a multitude of emergencies, just not hurricane season.
Yeah. And I mean, I think you made a good point of having folks just now maybe think through all the things that they might be going without if the power does go out. And I think we take a lot of things for granted. And all that's to say is I've, having lived through a few hurricanes now, I would be thinking about everything too, including comforts as well, because I remember I covered Hurricane Irma, when it went through Florida, and we were out in the field for the news, reporting on the storm, came home, the power was out, and it was out for 3 days, and I believe it was September is when this happened, and it was so hot, and we were just desperate for ways to stay cool. I mean, it was just driving you nuts how hot it was, and knowing that you couldn't turn the AC on. It sounds like a creature comfort, but that will save sanity too, thinking about that stuff as well.
Well, that's where, you're right. When having just a clean place to take a shower, a cool down, from a mental standpoint, it does help your mental health in that situation, because even though you don't have everything, it's just nice to have some creature comforts. I think that's the thing I always think about having covered storms too, is like, That's why I always joke when we have like young reporters who are like, I want to go cover a hurricane. I'm like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
I mean, because you think you're taking the corporate card and going to the beach. There's nowhere to use it, guys. Everything's closed. You're sleeping in your car. You're drinking bottled water, eating peanut butter crackers for 3 days. And like you said, you're not taking a shower. You're sweating. It's just, it's miserable because you're in the same boat as everybody else. There's just nothing there. All the creature comforts we take for granted. I mean, think about most people like, oh, I need to go get coffee. I just run to the store. Like I had new today. I'm like, oh, Amazon will deliver it to me tomorrow. Hey, when we get a storm, that's not happening. Nobody's delivering anything. You're not going to be able to run to the store. So think about those things that you can put away. The great thing is there's so many cool tools now. I mean, technology has helped us where, I have a lot of solar generators and battery packs and stuff that you can like.
You have like a Jackery. I have one of those now.
I mean, these things are. I have one in my shed, and it's amazing. It like powers my whole shed, but it's removable, so it's like my backup power supply. I can take and plug my refrigerator in. I have a battery powered fan with a mister, which to your example, they have a quick way to stay cool. So there's some great tools we have in 2025 that can actually get you through some of this stuff. And solar panels with a battery pack. I mean, I've gone camping with that, and that thing charged my phone, gave me a little bit of juice for a fan. I mean, and you're out in the middle of nowhere. I think about Starlinks, that during Helene was a huge asset. With a battery pack and that, we could have communication almost instantly. We would never had that for Katrina or any other event. We were using Nexstar things in the two-way communication. That was the way you did it back then. But now we have some resources that we can use in the pinch of emergency.
Yeah. If I could, I wanted to pivot to, I know a headline that you've been watching closely, and that's the staffing situation over at National Weather Service. Because, and I feel like this is a big topic of discussion right now because we are in hurricane season. Will there be ways for folks to appropriately be notified of events? So what have you been seeing on that front?
So we actually did 2 stories on that in the hurricane special because there's 2 things that are going on. A lot of the cuts are affecting NOAA, and within NOAA there's the organization, the National Weather Service, that's in the same umbrella organization. So, and just in complete transparency, we were in a staffing shortage going into the beginning of the year. So before this administration, there was a shortage of forecasters. So we were like 200 some forecasters down. There was open positions, and then I think 500 to 600 got either early retirement or laid off. So there was this huge void of people. Now, the good news, just in the last week, we don't know the exact number, but I heard it's like 125, 130. There's some emergency hiring going on. They've opened, the government has allowed NOAA to go hire people to fill these local forecast offices. And where the local forecast offices are important, it's for issuing the actual warnings, like flood warnings, tornado warnings, severe thunderstorm warnings. They're the ones on the local level that really get the information out. And then NOAA, as a bigger organization, actually has a smaller fleet. They have 2 hurricane hunters and a Gulfstream aircraft. So I talk about this in the special. There's 2 types of hurricane hunters. There's the 53rd Weather Reconnaissance Air Force hurricane hunters, and then we have the NOAA hurricane hunters. Now, they technically do the same thing, but for a different reason, if you will. The Weather Service, the 53rd Weather Squadron, the Air Force ones, they're strictly just flying into the storms to collect data for real-time information. NOAA's doing that as well, but they're also archiving the data. They have radar on their planes. They're doing it for research purposes to improve the modeling long range. And then they have this Gulfstream aircraft, which is really cool. It's a corporate jet, if you will. It flies at 30 to 40,000 feet. It doesn't fly into the hurricanes. It flies around them to sample the upper atmosphere so we know what the steering currents are. So now the Air Force has full funding. They're going to fly into all the storms. Where we lost funding, and I think 1 pilot, was for the NOAA aircraft. And it's kind of cool. Their 2 aircraft are called Miss Piggy and Kermit. They gave these nicknames.
That sounds familiar to me. Oh my
and
gosh.
one of the cool things about their aircraft is they actually have Doppler radar in the aircraft, so they can collect certain types of data that the Air Force cannot. So there is a difference, and that's why the NOAA cuts are a bigger deal than people actually think. They're like, well, we didn't get rid of all the hurricaners, but you got rid of a pretty important one because they're the ones that make the modeling better. So we're still be able to fly into the hurricanes this season, but we might be degrading the guidance or the forecast models in the future without enough NOAA aircraft. So those are the 2 concerns going into the season. But I think what's happening, and we're already seeing it, I think people are starting to realize, because what happens is all politics is local. So these local areas that are understaffed are in hurricane-prone areas are going to the federal government saying, hey, we need people here. This isn't a luxury. This is something that your taxpayer dollars are going towards, a really important thing. Of all the things that we spend tax money on, the weather service is probably the biggest return on investment. For every dollar that we spend, we get like $4 back in products or improvement in our lives. And that's why I always joke, I think it's a good thing and a bad thing. NOAA is in the Department of Commerce. Think about that. Department of Commerce. That's interstate trade and our monetary, right? The reason it's there is because that's how important it is to our economy that we have good weather information. Yeah. So it's really, really vital. And all of us rely on, even me as a chief meteorologist here at WCNC, I can't forecast the weather without the data that NOAA provides, the Doppler radars, the satellite, the weather balloons, the surface observations, the modeling. All of that is done by NOAA. I'm using that data, and then I'm producing a forecast for myself, and a lot of companies are taking that data for free and then selling that data to other people. So it's a huge economic engine, really, for the United States.
So if I could go back to a point that you made just a few moments ago, the fact that I guess currently there are some concerns about the forecasting, maybe, for the hurricanes. Are you talking about, for example, the cone of uncertainty that we see? Is that cone going to change?
This season, it's gotten a little smaller, which is good. And that's the cool thing about hurricanes. I mean, there's always this joke, and I hear it all the time. You probably do, like, oh, I wish I had a job. I could be wrong all the time. Like, the one thing I tell you, we are so good at this now compared to we were 10, 20, 30 years ago. And the best example is the hurricane cone. People don't forget, it only went out 3 days, like 10 years ago. Then it went to 5 days, and now we're going to go to 7 days. Okay?
That's wild.
And the cone used to be really wide. Like it used to be like, the wider the cone, the more air there is, because what the cone is like where we think the center of the storm is going to go. What's happened over time is the cone has gotten smaller because the forecast has gotten better. And now the average air is like the lowest it's ever been. I mean, when you see the charts of like accuracy, it's like, it's crazy how good it's gotten. And I think we're somewhat spoiled because, hurricanes don't sneak up on us anymore.
Yeah.
There was a time in this country where a ship would spot a hurricane in the Caribbean, and because we didn't have satellites, we didn't have the weather service, they would issue a hurricane warning from the coast of Texas to the coast of Maine because they just didn't know.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like the Galveston hurricane 1900, people were on the beach and were like, hey, the surf's kind of high today, not realizing there's a Category 3 storm offshore. That doesn't happen. I can track this thing from the coast of Africa to here for 14 days. That's an amazing achievement.
Yeah, and I feel like it points out, I feel spoiled because, like I said, growing up in Florida and dealing with hurricanes, I felt like I had such a terror over tornadoes.
Oh, yeah.
Because I felt like in my, I'm not an expert, just in my life experience, those seem to just pop up like whenever. In hurricanes, I just remember at least 3 days out. Like you would know that it was probably going to come to where you are, and you had time to at least prepare more if you hadn't prepared enough at that point.
Like a tornado, the average tornado warning lead time in this country, I think, is like 14 minutes.
Yeah.
We have like 7 days before a hurricane hits you, you're going to know about it. I mean, that is unbelievable. So, that's why it's so frustrating sometimes as a meteorologist, like when you see people not get out of the way or there's fatalities, it's like, how that's where you mentioned the communication part. Like, what can we do better to communicate these threats? Because these weren't surprises. And yet people are still not taking them seriously enough.
Yeah. I mean, I think, not an expert once again, but I feel like, to your point about how some people feel maybe I didn't get hit by this storm and now I won't get hit by this storm, or maybe I got hit by this storm and I'm prepared and I think I'm going to get hit by this one. And it's just really tough, I think, because, human nature, you're trying to...
As humans, we have optimism bias, we call it. We know something bad's going to happen, but it's not going to happen to me.
Yeah.
And, until it does. And then it's like, oh, so that's the tough part. It really is.
Yeah. Well, our time on Live Impact News is coming to a close in just a few moments. So we'll just remind everyone the hurricane special, you can watch it right here on WCNC Plus. It's at 8 tomorrow, right?
Yep, 8
Okay.
o'clock. It'll be on linear and streaming, so you could watch it any way you
On
want.
TV, on here, WCNC
Yep.
Plus. I know you're going to be on the stream too as
Yep,
well.
we'll be
so-
back tomorrow,
yeah.
and maybe we'll talk about some of the things a little more detail and get into it more. But yeah, it's really, I hope people watch it. And the great thing is it's an evergreen kind of special. So if you don't see it tomorrow, you can go rewatch it
On demand.
as we get into the season.
Yeah, on demand, WCNC Plus. Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich, thank you so much for joining us. Folks, here Live Impact News, we're going to sign off for the evening, but of course, more news coming up at 11, including that breaking news, the arrest made in the Hickory mass shooting.